think Professor Sayegh sort of outlined some of the questions that are presented right now as we speak to the United States Congress and to myself and 434 other members as to how we implement those sanctions. Now, ultimately, these are really decisions made by the President. Something as nuanced and as logistically complicated as the imposition of sanctions is not something that the United States Congress implements. It's something that the administration and the State Department implements. But we certainly have a role in that conversation. And it seems to me that two of the fundamental questions with regard to how we would go about a new regime of sanctions that could provide a pathway to real diplomatic conversations, so long as it sort of pressured the right forces within Iran, is one, who are the sanctions targeted to be operative on? Do you target sanctions to sort of run at the political leadership? Secretary Clinton has talked a lot about targeted sanctions that would go after the assets and bank accounts and wealth and resources of the elite ruling class, or do you impose much broader sanctions that seek to cripple the entire economy at large, so as to give support to the restive feelings of dissent within the country? Second, as Professor Sayegh outlined, do you approach sanctions from a multilateral perspective, or do you approach sanctions from a unilateral perspective? Does the U.S. go it alone, or do we wait until we can get some consensus within the UN or within the global community outside of the UN? I would just put this out for food for thought, and then kick it off to questions from all of you. I don't think that either of those questions are mutually exclusive. And again, I admit that I'm a student of this subject as we go along. I don't think you have to do either or in terms of who you target your sanctions on. I think you absolutely, without question, go after the assets and wealth and resources of the elite of that country. And we have tools at our disposal to do that at a much higher level than we're doing today. And I think there's no question that some broad economic sanctions, especially going at the capacity of that country to refine and make money off of its oil reserves, can have some real and important effects on the calculus that the citizens of that nation make. But I think you can also move the other way as well. I think we just learned this morning, if not this week, that we are beginning to actually loosen some of the economic sanctions to Iran with respect to communications and internet access technology. That there may be places in which we can actually facilitate some use of technologies that broadens the Iranian population's perspective to dissident views that might go hand in hand with, I think, probably much more robust and much more important sanctions on the economy as a whole. And I think the same thing can be said with respect to unilateral and multilateral sanctions. I do think it makes sense to try to build as wide a consensus as possible, both from a moral and also practical standpoint. You want as many different nations joining together to isolate that regime and give power to the reformists as possible. But you also want the broadest economic punch for your buck, and that happens with more countries joining rather than less. But it seems as if it's a new sanctions resolution out of the UN. The price may be that it's fairly limited in effect. And so that seems to me to be a very appropriate platform for countries or regions to go above and beyond that initial step of multilateral sanctions. Already the EU is talking about putting on top of a UN set of sanctions their own set of sanctions. The United States could certainly come in after that as well. And I think that combination of having the UN sanctions and the unilateral or sort of multinational but not UN sanctions are important as well. So I think some of these conversations tend to be presented as binary, and I think that I would just challenge the Congress and the administration to think about ways in which some of these considerations are not mutually exclusive. There are no easy answers here. I mean, I wish that I sat out here and said that I know that economic sanctions are going to change their calculus, that I know that diplomacy is going to change their calculus. I think that we wish we had better tools at our disposal to do exactly what Dr. Smollett challenges us to do, which is to remain silent no longer and to set as an absolute bottom line that we will not accept a nuclear-armed Iran or an Iran that continues to propose for today an existential threat to the Israeli people. But as you very rightly points out, tomorrow an existential threat to many, many more. And I think our question, and my question, is not about whether or not we rise to that challenge. I think that that's our moral and security imperative as a nation. The question that presents us is what are the tools that are best utilized to do that?